Aaron, I want to thank you for joining me on this show where we're exploring the intersection between psychology and philosophy. I have to say, for everybody who's watching live now, and for all the people who will be watching later on, that you are my favorite philosophy teacher. I've probably
Thank you.
told you that. I think I have, but I don't know if I told you why you're my favorite. One of the reasons you're my favorite philosophy teacher.
I don't think so.
All right, I'm going to tell you now. It's because you have a great enthusiasm for ideas, and it is communicated in every word that you say. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or give you performance anxiety, but you really make ideas come alive for me. When you were lecturing, it was never a lecture. It was always very, very fascinating to me. And so the reason was inspired to do this series was because, I've been on the psychologist couch since I was 16 years old, but never really started to notice improvements in my own my sense of well-being and my psychological sense of things until I started working with objectivism and applying objectivism in my life. And so idea of where psychology and philosophy intersect and how they assist each other or how they work together fundamentally has been interesting to me. And so I've started this series to try to clarify some of those boundaries and where those intersections happen. And so I originally titled this show, some of the pitfalls that you can fall into as a budding young objectivist. And you
Mhm.
sort of corrected the formulation because it's really about misinterpreting objectivist principles and their application than it is the philosophy itself creating pitfalls for somebody. Let's talk a little bit about that first of all. Um,
Sure. Yeah. For people who don't know what objectivism is the philosophy developed by Ayn Rand, she's the author of Atlas Shrugged, if you've heard of that book. And essentially, to put her view in a nutshell, she stands for the supremacy of reason, the idea that reason is your only means of knowledge and your only proper guide to values. So she's opposed to anything related to like faith, mysticism, authority, but she's equally opposed to skepticism, the idea that knowledge is impossible, truth is relative and stuff. Now, she thinks you can actually know things if you use reason, and so it's reason in all aspects of your life. She thinks that morality is an issue of self-interest. It's about identifying and pursuing and achieving the kinds of values that actually sustain and advance your own life. And that it sort of social political terms that every individual is an end in himself, not the means to the ends of others. And so in social political terms, she stands for the principle of individual rights, the idea that every individual has the moral right to exist for his own sake, to pursue his own life and values as he sees fit, as long as he respects the rights of others to do the same. And so she stands for political freedom as well. So if you put it as reason, egoism or self-interest, individualism, and capitalism, which she thinks, I mean, laissez-faire capitalism, where you don't treat separately man's choices and values and actions in economics from his choices, values, and actions and freedom in intellectual issues, moral issues, personal issues, but he should be economically free as well. So it's about individualism and freedom and living by reason. So this is a philosophy that she developed in her novels, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and then, in many, many books and articles and so on. And so what, Mark, you were saying is you got a lot of positive value out of your reading of Objectivism. I know I did too. I discovered it, I think, earlier than you did. I think you discovered it, maybe your 20s or late 20s, maybe?
yeah.
Yeah, I discovered it when I was 19. And so for me, my reading of The Fountainhead, it was like, wow, this is what it looks like to take your life seriously and to have a sense of what you want out of life and to really pursue it in a single-minded way. And that was really valuable. And then read Atlas Shrugged, and then that gave me a whole philosophic perspective and a framework. And this, I guess, maybe can segue into this sort of philosophy, psychology stuff. But so what attracts people to objectivism, to Ayn Rand's philosophy, and what they find gripping and personally important about it is the positive. So we're going to be talking about, pitfalls that one might fall into or errors that one might make in one's understanding and application of the philosophy. But I think it's important to say that, I mean, this is my perspective, that you don't have to share it, and you maybe have to like learn something about it and figure out what you think of it. But my perspective on it is that it's an enormous positive for one's life. It gives you a kind of framing that's rational. It gives you a sense of goals and what kind of goals to pursue and what kind of person to become that's rational and inspiring. And it advocates for a system that allows you to be free to function, a political system that allows you to be free to function in life by your own judgment. And I think it's just, all of that's just an enormous undiluted positive in my view. We can argue about that. But
Oh,
like any philosophy.
I couldn't
Yeah,
agree with you. First of all, I just want to say I couldn't agree with you more. As I said in the beginning, I started to note real psychological progress in my life once I started applying the principles of objectivism seriously to my life. But that meant an integration had to take place. It took a long time, frankly, to actually integrate ideas from abstractions in my head to actual applicable principles in my life. And I remember hearing Leonard Peikoff say something like he was writing a concept on a blackboard one day when he was teaching. He'd been teaching the concept for a decade or so, and he looked at it suddenly and said, "That is true." It's as if it suddenly dripped right down into his guts and became a felt sense, as opposed to just something he knew. But you keep talking about these positives because we're gonna get into some of the pitfalls and misinterpretations that I think some people fall into that don't take the positives away from the philosophy, because the philosophy itself is so life affirming. But they
yeah.
can, but being aware of these things, I think, could help you avoid that stuff and keep on the positive track that
Oh,
objective.
for sure. Because I mean, I know less about your experience about this, but my experience has been there's a lot of ways to go wrong. And it's not unique to objectivism. So if, Stoicism is very popular these days, and of course Christianity is everywhere and so on. But you can go on Facebook groups and you can be like Stoicism Facebook groups, and you'll get the same kind of thing. I'm trying to detach myself from my values and whatever, but I had to put my dog down, and I'm having trouble coping. And what does Stoicism have to say about this? Or what does it look like to live a proper Christian life? Like I'm supposed to have Christian charity, but my neighbors keep blasting music out and playing the drums and stuff, and it's driving me crazy. It's like, should I be charitable? Like how should I, as a Christian, sort of respond? And so it's how to understand a worldview and apply it in concrete cases in one's life. It's not unique to objectivism. It's not like objectivism has a problem. It's just sort of like that is an aspect of understanding a philosophy and learning to apply it. So I don't think it's unique to objectivism in that regard. Though there are some things that are special and distinctive about objectivism, where people do go wrong, I think, in their misunderstanding.
So
And
can we
yeah,
talk,
go
can we
ahead.
talk about one of the main things that in my view, like, so we understand that the only means of knowledge is reason, and some people can use that concept to denigrate their own emotional life or to not listen to their own emotions. That is not what I think objectivism preaches. Objectivism does not tell you that your emotions are bad, just not necessarily a means to knowledge of the outside world. Repression is a bad thing for your psychological
Oh
life.
yeah.
And Rand constantly, I remember tons of times Rand talked about the ill effects of emotional repression. And so let's talk about how some people misinterpret the idea of being rational as a sort of Spock, McCoy, false dichotomy, as opposed to an integrated thing that I think objectivists really see it as.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned McCoy, I should say for the audience, uh, I'm a philosopher, not a psychologist, Jim. So I'm not a professional at psychology or anything. I'm a philosopher, but I
You
think
have to say,
philosophy
I'm
has.
a philosopher, Jim.
That's right. You're the actor. Uh, but no, I mean, so philosophy has a lot to say about issues that are psychological in nature, and there's a lot of overlap between philosophy and psychology because of it deals with values. Values deal with motivation. It deals with morality. Morality deals with issues of guilt and self-esteem. And so there's all sorts of things that, like, a bad philosophy can wreck your psychology, and a good philosophy can put it on the right track. That doesn't mean it can solve all psychological problems. I mean, some, I think you really need to go to a professional and work with specialized techniques and things that they have in their toolkit. In effect, sometimes people need medication for a while. And so there's all sorts of things that are outside, like philosophy can't do everything. But just think about the ways in which, I mean, I know people who went through like Catholic school and they still struggle with Catholic guilt, and they're like atheists now, and they still struggle with these like long standing issues of guilt and repression. Their attitude toward pleasure is overly puritanical, and they kind of realize it, and they're trying to move away from it, and yet it's just sort of, it keeps reasserting itself. And there's all sorts of things, and not unique to Christianity, but it's just such a widespread one. And you get a certain kind of worldview with a certain kind of perspective on values and a certain kind of perspective on human nature that you internalize, and it can be either very empowering or very hindering, I think, to one's life and self-esteem and perspective on oneself in the world as an actor and as an agent in the world. But about the issue of reason, yeah. So she's big on reason, of course. That's a funny way to put it, but she thinks that reason is your only means of knowledge, and that life is essentially a knowledge problem. What you need to know is you need to come to understand the world around you so you can know how to navigate it. You need to understand what kinds of values to pursue if you're going to find the values that actually sustain and enrich your life. You need to figure out, this is a matter of reason, it's a matter of knowledge. You need to figure out what methods of functioning do you need to adopt in life if you're going to be successful. And I don't mean you're the CEO or something, but I mean just to live successfully as a human being. All of these are issues of knowledge, and all of them are reached by reason, your capacity to think conceptually, to grasp causal connections, and so on. And that there is no place for something like faith. There is no place for reliance, blind reliance on authority. There are no supernatural revelations that are going to sort of hand the truth to you mystically. You have to figure it out, and there's no way around that. And she makes the point many times that she says, and this is a quote, she says, emotions are not tools of cognition.
Now explain that.
And so,
Explain it for people out there, because
yeah,
our culture tells us the opposite. Whenever you're, our culture will tell us, do you want to know what partner to pick for life?
go with your
Ask,
heart.
go with your heart. You don't want to know what profession you should follow, what your vocation is. Go with your heart. It's always follow your heart, follow your heart, follow your heart. Now here's Rand telling us, don't do that. And that could lead some people to think that emotions aren't necessarily positive influences in their life, but that's not what she means. So unpack that for us a little bit.
Sure. I mean, part of it, it's coming out of her conception of what emotions are. So emotions, she regards, and I think she's right about this, but it's emotions are responses that we have as a result of our judgments. So if you judge that something is the case, and you judge that something is of value, or your values are threatened. So just take an example. There's a Doberman running straight at you. Now, if you judge that this is a Doberman running after me, it's dangerous, I'm in danger, and that's the sort of value perspective, you'll feel something like fear. But if you judge that, oh, that's my pet dog, Daisy, I haven't seen her in 5 years, and she's rushing up to meet me, you'll feel something like joy or elation. So emotions aren't kind of wild bolts from the blue, unconnected from your judgments or unconnected from your thinking or your values. They actually flow directly out of them. And so your emotions don't tell you anything independent. The emotions are not an independent source of knowledge about the world or about facts about the world. They're completely dependents. They're like your stepbrother who lays on the couch all day and like lives off you. They're actually dependents because they simply flow out of your thinking and your values. So the question then is, when you're thinking about your emotions, go with your heart, right? Well, what does your heart tell you? In other words, what's your emotional response to things? And then you have to think about, why do I experience the emotion that I do about this? What are the judgments that underlie that emotion, and explain it? Because those judgments can be wrong. Those judgments can be misguided. You could have a kind of a resentment towards someone because you judged that they had done you wrong in some way. But you could be wrong about that. You could be mistaken about that. And then your emotional reaction to the person is, in fact, inappropriate to the facts. So you can't rely on your emotions as if, well, I have two sources of guidance about reality. On one shoulder, I've got reason, and on the other shoulder, I've got my emotions. One tells me this about reality, another tells me this one. I just got to kind of figure out who's right in any given sense. Maybe sometimes I listen to the emotions, and sometimes I listen to the reason. But whenever you're listening to the emotions, so to speak, you're in effect listening to the judgments and value judgments that you formed already. So you're listening to your thinking, but downstream. In effect, downstream is not the right metaphor, but you can't rely on your emotions as if they provide you anything different or independent from your thinking. So also, emotions can't distinguish between the true and the false. So if you say, I got a real strong feeling, or a for or against some action, does that mean that's the right action you should take? Well, the emotions can't settle that. They can't tell you that. You say you feel positively or negatively to something because you've already judged, here's what the situation is, here's its value significance to me. Maybe you got a new role at work or something, and you kind of feel positive about it in some sense, kind of mixed, kind of negative about it, positive, because maybe it involves more money and you feel good about that, but maybe it involves a whole lot of travel too, and you're going to spend less time with your dog or your family, and it's sort of a mixed blessing. But again, your emotions aren't really the guide, but they do tell you something, and you ignore them at your peril, I think. Is that they do indicate that you think about the situation in a certain kind of way. They kind of give you a clue to your values and to your thoughts. They tell you that you feel something. They don't tell you why, but they're important indicators. And also, that's putting it not negatively, but it's not strong enough. I mean, the objectivist view of emotions is that emotions are fantastic. And I'll read you a quote. This is from an interview that Ayn Rand did with Playboy magazine. She says, she was asked this question about reason and emotion. She says, and this I think encapsulates it. His emotions, man's emotions, this quote, his emotions are not his enemies. They are his means of enjoying life. But they are not his guide. The guide is his mind. And that encaptures it. You have to lead your life by your best judgment, by the guidance of your best thinking. That's how you lead your life. Your emotions don't give you a special, separate, independent knowledge of reality that reason can't access or something. The heart has its reasons, and the mind doesn't know, and so on. That's not true.
So
they're also the way in which you experience the joy of life. Without emotions, if you were literally, I mean, even Spock has some emotions, he just tries to suppress them. But if you didn't have emotions, you wouldn't have joy. You couldn't experience pleasure. You couldn't experience enjoyment. There'd be no reason to live. I think you couldn't experience the reality and the joy of achieving your values. There'd be no happiness. So what would be the point of reasoning?
So it seems so clear to me that there's an integration of emotional life, that emotions are so important to objectivism, but they have a specific place, I think the proper psychological place. And I think if you approach your emotions from the objectivist perspective, you actually become much healthier, because you explore where your feelings are coming from. You're never drifting. You don't drift. You don't hold psychological drift. You question feelings that are coming out of particularly negative feelings, or their origins, where they're coming from, because you want to improve your life and change your life and make it better, and always be, it's proactive in that sense. But why is it that some can interpret objectivism as being anti-emotion then? Since it's clear from everything that Rand has written that emotions are the seasoning of life, it's the flavor of life.
Yeah, it's that she's anti-emotionalism. and you pick that up from day one in objectivism, so to speak. It's you can't just fly by the seat of your pants, go with whatever feeling you happen to have. And it's like, that's a disaster as approach to life. And she's very much opposed to that. So she's opposed to emotionalism. And I think that can, what people can take away is that I should be suspicious of my emotions, or if I shouldn't involve emotions in my decision making. I think your emotions shouldn't carry the day, but I think it matters a lot, your emotions. If you think about, just take two legitimate careers. You think, well, I could be an actor, or I could be a carpenter, or I could be an accountant at a bank. And these are all legitimate, perfectly legitimate careers. And let's say, just from the perspective of reason, these are things that are within my capacity. I can do these things. They're not beyond me. I can afford, in effect, the training or the whatever I would need to do this. And so they're moral. It's not like they're a bank robber or something. And it's like, okay, so reason can say that. But then you think like, how do I feel about, like, if I think about like being an actor, or if I think about being a carpenter, like, what does that do for me? And sometimes you can get excited about something. You can start projecting like what a life like that would be like, and all the things you could make. And you start to think, I'm getting a really positive emotional feeling here. Now that's because of what you think about the subject and what a life would be like about that. But that's relevant. You can't say, here's 5 legitimate careers that reason says is okay and that I can do. There's no barrier to it. But what do I want? Like, what's my desire? And it's not that you just lead with your desires, or whatever I desire, I'll go do that. Like, that's crazy, because then you have to actually think, yeah, I might desire that, but does that make any sense to do that? Is it moral to do that? Is this going to involve, 20 years of schooling and like $200,000 of debt, and I have nowhere to bring that money, and it's just not plausible or practical? So reason has to be what decides the issue, but your emotions are important also in even making decisions like that. Like, they don't make the decision, but they're important, because it's like, no, I respond specially to this kind of field, and to thinking about myself in this field, and to what it would be like. And I look at other people who have this kind of career, and it's exciting to me, and I like to follow them, and I get some kind of joy out of watching them achieve the things that they do. And it's like, yeah, I can see myself there. Whereas the other ones, yeah, I mean, I guess I could be an accountant, but I don't know. I feel like I got like a 9-to-5 job, and I show up and work with a bunch of adults, and I don't know. Like I used to teach gymnastics, so I used to work with kids for a long time. I used to think, man, if I had a job where I had to work with just all adults or something, that might be kind of drab or
Can you do
something.
backflips? Can you do backflips and stuff like that?
Oh, I wouldn't try it anymore. I'm too old.
Okay,
I could, but not now.
that's impressive. That's impressive.
I mean, on a trampoline, I'm sure I could if I wanted to.
So, okay, so we know that some folks can misinterpret objectivism to mean that emotions aren't important and you shouldn't include them in your life, but that's not what objectivism really is. They're the seasoning of life. They're the flavor. They're definitely, they're clues to your own values, your own value judgments, and they're important for you to think about and to delve into, to get to the bottom of things. That's part of, I think, this, the merging of psychology too, using psychology to help you get to the bottom of some issues, and philosophy to help clarify that. What other sort of misinterpretations can somebody who's new to objectivism sort of fall into? Because a lot of the people who are going to be watching this, not just presently, but in the future, are new to objectivism. So they're going to be confronting these ideas for the first time, many of them. So we've talked about emotions, and I don't want people to shy away from their emotional life. I'm an extremely passionate person, as anybody who watches my exchanges on Twitter will know. I'm passionate, I'm fiery. Rand was passionate. You just watch her talk. She's very passionate.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's embrace your emotions, but understand them.
yes.
Understand where they're coming from. She tells you introspection is the primary responsibility you have. Why do I feel what I feel? Is it consistent with the facts? And if it is, then you don't have to run around suspicious of your emotions. They'll flow naturally out of your own well thought out judgments, and you want a harmony between the two. Yeah.
Now we talked about when people sort of graft a religious interpretation onto objectivism, or a religious type of practice onto objectivism, and how that could lead to some erroneous conclusions. So, to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So particularly people that are new to objectivism, but even people who've been with objectivism for some time. I mean, I see these in people our age. It's Objectivism offers a morality, and a set of virtues and values and things that are the basic framework of your moral perspective from objectivism coming out of objectivist philosophy. But I put this largely at the feet of religion, but it's not all entirely coming from religion, but it's this. We tend to learn morality as a set of do's and don'ts, a set of commands and prohibitions. Wash behind your ears, help Aunt Rosalie, share your toy, do this, don't do that, don't play with your food. I mean, it's a lot of, I mean, this is a little silly, but it's like that's often the way it is. It's you learn it as a set of things you're supposed to do and not supposed to do, and you'll get praised for one and punished for the other. And if you get more into religion, you get a set of commands that you're supposed to follow and obey and adhere to, comply with. And people that are coming to objectivism for the first time and they're reading Ayn Rand, and whether they're moving away from religion or not, hopefully they are, in my view. But even if they move away from a religious philosophy and they start to think, oh, there's no God or whatever, they often bring to objectivism that same duty approach to ethics. So they move, in effect, from the 10 Commandments to Ayn Rand's 7 Virtues, and they kind of carry over the perspective that morality is about obedience and compliance to rules and principles. And when you think about it in terms of duty, I mean, the essence of duty is compliance or obedience, whether you like it or not, whether it's in your interest or to your advantage or not. It's a just do it approach. You think it's stuff you just gotta do. And Ayn Rand is completely opposed to that. She rejects the whole notion of duty. She said in objectivism, she says there are no duties. She said in reality, there's no such thing as duties. So anytime you've got to do something, it's you've got to do something as a means toward an end. So if I say, you got to take the Interstate 81 south, it's like, well, if you want to get to Austin, Texas, and you're in Minneapolis, or I don't remember what this highway is, but it doesn't matter. It's like, then you got to do that. If you want to get into the office, you got to open the door. If you want to work, you have to think and apply your knowledge. If you want to eat, you got to work. So it's like kind of,
Did you just solve
yeah.
the is-ought problem?
Well, in effect, that is the answer to if you're
Yes.
familiar with the sort of is-ought problem, or how do you get from facts to value judgments. And the tie, there's 2 ties. I mean, one is the choice. I mean, the issue is the choice to live. If you choose to live, you choose to remain in existence, you choose to live as a human being, then morality can set forth all sorts of different prescriptions for, then you should do this and you should do that, and you should try to live in this way and not that way. You should use your reason, not rely on faith. You should have integrity. I mean, just take integrity. If you want your thoughts and your best judgments to be operative in your life, to be the ones that actually guide your actions towards success in the world, you have to act in accordance with your judgments, not cave in when you get pressure and just let your judgments and principles just sort of stay in your mind as your own private gallery of little noble things that you don't go out and apply in the world. Or take honesty. If you want to make sure that you're maintaining the tie between your thinking and the facts of reality, you can't fake reality to yourself, and you can't fake reality to others. There's no value in faking reality. You have to face facts as they are and live in accordance with them. I mean, that's how you keep your tie to the facts that you have to deal with in life, the honesty. Rationality. If you want to live, embrace your means of survival, which is reason. If you want to know, if you want to have the kind of knowledge you need in life, embrace your means of knowledge. That's the virtue of rationality, full time. And don't jerk it back on a leash when it goes to conclusions you don't want to reach or are afraid of, or don't want to face. So it can set out virtues, which are kind of, in effect, methods of action for reaching your values. It can set out a list of virtues if you specify the goal. If the goal is a human life, proper human life, and by proper, I mean a human life lived in human terms, given the nature of the beings we are, given what our life requires, what is a life lived successfully as a human being? And it can set out, okay, well, then you're going to need to do, broadly speaking, these kinds of things and live, broadly speaking, according to these kinds of principles. And that's what an ethics can offer. And so her view about ethics is not like, as she puts, a scarecrow with a stick chasing away your pleasures, demanding that you do this and don't do that and obey and comply. Ethics is about setting out the causal means to the achievement of your goals. And in that sense, ethics is your ally, not your enemy, not your, mean, wicked stepmother or something like that. And it's not just, a set of commands that sort of weigh down on you and impress down on you that you have to comply with and grit your teeth and do it. Like that, get rid of that whole concept of morality fully. But people often, through no fault of their own, I think it's just sort of, you come with that sort of aspect to greater or lesser extent. When you read Objectivism, you think, oh, okay, now she's offering this morality, and then it's the duty to be productive and the duty to be rational. And it's like, no, it's not a duty. The more you think about that, it's about obedience, compliance, living up to what Ayn Rand demands, or failing and then feeling guilty. And it's about the punishment for not living up to the Objectivist morality is you won't achieve the goals you want out of life. You won't live successfully. And so your motivational tie to morality, to the Objectivist morality, is your motivational tie to your goals. If I'm going to live successfully, and if I care about the kinds of goals that I want to achieve, the morality she's giving me is the causal means of reaching it. And so there's no, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, this is tremendously interesting. It's just getting my mind spinning in all the right ways. And I don't know if I can explain this exactly the way I'm conceptualizing it. But it seems to me that once you hold your life as a value, truly hold your life as a value, things that you would then the things that would seem like chores before are not chores anymore. They're actually things you embrace and enjoy. Working out, going to school, learning, productive activity. If you're not taking these things as duties that you have to perform and but but as you said, means to achieving the life that you want, you end up embracing that stuff. You know who told me that years and years and years ago in a different language was Jeff Goldblum. He ate healthy all the time, and he didn't drink alcohol or anything. And me, I was, a young actor, drinking, going out after the plays and partying, and he's like, and I would say, well, you eat all this good stuff. I was always sort of healthy, but I didn't hold it as a value. And he said something that was, it struck me as unusual at the time. It was something like, yeah, once I know something's good for me, I like it. I like it. Once I know something's good for me, I like it. And that was so weird to me until I really started embracing objectivism. And then once I know something's good for me, even if it means, well, for an hour and a half, I'm going to have to endure some uncomfortable shit in the, working out hard or doing jiu-jitsu or whatever, I know what I want to achieve. And so it feels amazing in the end, or sometimes in the middle of it, even through the discomfort, just the act of conquering the discomfort and knowing that what I'm working for makes me feel good in the midst of it too. So
yeah, and so two things are required there. One is, yes, you have to actually understand that it is good for you. If you're kind of, well, I think I should probably quit this and that, or I should probably work out more, but it's not fully real to you that this is good for me, you'll have a motivational issue and you'll have to sort of struggle with that. And then the other thing is, even if you're fully convinced that it's good for you, sometimes you do have to reassert that perspective when things are challenging or get hard, and you have to kind of make it real to yourself again, what your best thinking is on this subject. And if it is no, I really should eat more of this or work out more of that or whatever it is, or maybe just spend more time with my family or whatever the goal you want to honor is, and you think that no, this is actually good for me. Sometimes you have to reassert that perspective because it's easy for that to other things intrude, other concerns, other worries, or things get difficult, or you're stressed about certain things, and just that sort of tends to push your focus in a different direction, and you can lose sight of what you actually think
So
in
how is
clear
that
terms.
different? Reasserting that, how is that different from the taskmaster, the religious taskmaster whipping you and telling you you should be doing this?
You're trying to call to mind what your own thinking is on the issue, and you're trying to reassert the tie between what you truly value and what you truly want and the actions needed to get there. So like there's this, I saw this on, I think on TV somewhere, and I don't know if this is a fake memory, like I thought I saw this, or maybe I don't know what, but I seem to remember this thing on TV where it's like a mirror and you're in your room, and so you're supposed to work out in front of the mirror, right? But it has a more svelte or more trimmed up version of you in the mirror. So when let's say you got your shirt off and you're working or something, it shows you as looking better. I mean, not like Schwarzenegger or something, but it shows you as looking maybe leaner or stronger or whatever. And you can kind of envision, yeah, I could look like this is what I'm working for. And you're trying to do something like that. You're trying to say, I want to keep in mind the vision of where I want to go, what I want to become, or whatever it is, to keep me motivated to take the actions when it's often like difficult or it's stressful or it takes effort, and you could be doing other things, and it's keep that vision in mind of no, this is where I'm going. Because that is where you'll kind of keep that sort of value attachment. And then you'll remember, yeah, that's why I'm not eating bread, or that's why I'm dragging my sorry ass to Jiu-Jitsu or whatever. Yeah, it's because this is what I want. And I have to remember it's what I want. And this is how to get there.
And that's not a duty. That's because it's a full acknowledgement of your values, your goals, and your will to.
Yeah, it's
So
motivation by your personal desires, which you validated, and you've thought, I mean, this is the rational element of it. You have to validate your personal desires. It can't be, yeah, I want to be a really good bank robber and stuff like, okay, so I'm going to work really hard. And it's like you have to think, this is what I want. It's valid to want this. And that you're trying to maintain a motivational tie toward what it is that you want. So it's like duty is all about disconnection from personal values. It's motivation by duty, by obedience and compliance, not of personal values. I mean, in like Immanuel Kant, who's a German philosopher, he was a big advocate of duty. And he contrasted acting in accordance with duty with acting in accordance with inclination. So he said, if you do something because you want to do it, that's not moral. That's
madness,
not a moral motivation.
madness.
But if you do something just because it's your duty,
Yeah.
no matter what it does to you, it can completely ruin your life. That's a moral motivation. So, and that's a kind of secularized, I think, religious perspective. But yeah, it's completely opposite from that. It's try to figure out what you want. There's this good line. So there's an essay by Ayn Rand called "Causality versus Duty." It's in her book Philosophy Who Needs It, which is essential reading on that issue. And it's like, take what you want and pay for it. Figure out what it is that you want out of life and take the steps needed to achieve it. And morality is a specification of that for a human life.
I love that saying, take what you want and pay for it. I love that. Just like judge and be prepared to be judged. That's very powerful concepts to me. What other do you think misinterpretations of objectivism could lead people down the path? We've explored the imposition of a religious oriented duty orientation towards virtues, which is not the case with objectivism. It's acknowledging life as your primary value and then doing what you have to do to achieve the ends that you want in your life. We've talked about emotion as actually something that objectivists integrate into their life, not something they reject. It's actually a very powerful part of your life and should be a powerful part of your life. not something you reject. It's a clue to your own values, to your own choice, and very good for you to experience those things. What other areas are there in which people can misinterpret objectivism to take them down sort of a strange path?
I would say, so one of the things that Ayn Rand stresses a lot is that the achievement of any kind of serious goals in life is a long-range pursuit. I want to become an actor. That's not like you snap your finger or just walk down the store to the grocery store. Like, that's not like you can walk around the corner, like, and I can get a jug of milk. Like, it's not a long-range plan that you have to carry out over the course of years or months or whichever. It's simple to achieve. But most of what you need to do in life, you need to think long range. You need to think and plan long range. It doesn't mean you can't be spontaneous, but the idea is most of your major goals are long range goals. And you need to think long range as well. You can't just say, oh, this is fun in the moment. And it's like, oh, now I have a criminal record. Uh-oh. You need to think, you need to frame the now, the present, the short range in terms of the long range. And so she's very much about being long range. And she often says, you shouldn't be short range. You shouldn't have this short range mentality, range of the moment, as she puts it a lot. You just think from moment to moment. You live from moment to moment, and there's no connection between things. You're not thinking ahead as to what this will mean for you down the line. And she said, that is like an animal's existence. Oh, here's an acorn. Oh, tree. Okay. And you're not trying to connect, couple of years later, maybe I should, set up somewhere where I can really keep my acorns, and they kind of go bad, and so I need to think ahead. And it's like, no, that's not really what they do. Human beings do that in general. You think about a career, you think about a college education, even to the level of, if I take these courses early on, I can establish enough of a relationship with some of my professors. Maybe they can write me a recommendation letter. But if I try to hustle into their courses the last semester of my senior year, it's like, I'm not going to have time. A lot of it's about thinking and planning out, because there are causal steps that are required to reach goals that are often complex or long range. She's big on the long range. And one of the things that I've seen people, and she says, you shouldn't be like this range of the moment, short range mentality. And I think she's right about that. But what I've seen among some younger objectivists, or people who are new to objectivism, is they ignore the short range and they ignore the now. So it's everything. So they'll often sort of either deny themselves the sort of momentary or short range pleasures or short range goals, because they think I should be long range. And either they only have long range goals, and they ignore all the range of momentary pleasures, short range goals, just going to the goddamn movie because it's fun. Like, they ignore those things because they have to think. Ayn Rand says, be long range, think long range, have long range goals. And I've seen this happen. And so sometimes what people do is they'll try to, and here's one sign of this. You try to justify short-range pleasures in terms of long-range goals. Well, if I go to the movie now, it'll feel good, so that'll give me the motivation to get back to my dissertation, and then and it's like, it's okay to just go to the movie, because the enjoyment of watching the movie is an end in itself. You don't have to tie it in to some long-range goal to somehow justify it to yourself. There are long-range goals and long-range perspectives, and there are short-range goals. And you shouldn't sacrifice the one to the other. What you need to do is integrate the two so that your short-range goals don't sabotage your long-range goals. But you should be doing both on a regular basis.
That's very important. That's very important what you said, because that's very helpful, I think. You make sure your short range term goals don't sabotage the long term, but you should be integrating them all the time. I mean, to me, objectivism is, there's lots of pleasure in objectivism. There's lots of worldly pleasure and enjoyment of life and joie de vivre that you should be taking in every day. just an example online for you, when you would post pictures of food that you'd created, that to me that was a great, expression of, look at this beautiful thing I've created for breakfast or dinner, or this amazing dish. It was because enjoyment of food it satisfies so many of my senses. It's such a great pleasure on so many levels, a creative pleasure and a pleasure on so many levels. But that's an example of taking a short range joy, and it's just for the purpose of enjoyment. It's just for the purpose of having fun, or titillating your senses, and you don't have to necessarily connect it to anything else, provided it's not sabotaging your long-term stuff.
Yeah, and to connect it, life is an end in itself, and the enjoyment of life is an end in itself. And to put an Ayn Rand quote to this, she says, pleasure is the form in which man experiences the reality of his values. Pleasure is an end in itself. Now, you can be a little bit you can kind of lean a little anti-pleasure, some new kind of objectivists, because they realize Ayn Rand rejects hedonism, the idea that pleasure is the standard of value. It's not the standard of value. In other words, if something feels good, it is good. Like, no, yeah, no, the crack high felt great, so it is good. Like, that was the exhilarating robbing the bank, so it's good for me. No, so the fact that you experience pleasure as a result of something doesn't mean it's good for you. So she rejects hedonism, but not pleasure. Pleasure is fantastic. And so not taking pleasure seriously and not integrating pleasure on a regular basis into your life is really detrimental. So it's not like, well, you could have your eggs without the spice, or you could have your eggs with spice, and okay, it makes it a little bit better. No, it's really, really, really important to have pleasure in your life. I pulled up another passage on this because I knew pleasure was going to come up in some form. And I love this passage. It comes from an essay she wrote called Our Cultural Value Deprivation. It's in her book, The Voice of Reason. And just let this sink in about this view about pleasure. Quote, a chronic lack of pleasure, of any enjoyable, rewarding, or stimulating experiences, produces a slow, gradual, day-by-day erosion of man's emotional vitality, which he may ignore or repress, but which is recorded by the relentless computer of his subconscious mechanism that registers an ebbing flow, then a trickle, then a few last drops of fuel, until the day when his inner motor stops and he wonders desperately why he has no desire to go on.
Wow.
Now, how important is pleasure?
Vital.
And it's vital. And it's, someone asked me once, it's a kind of a sad question, but it's also a philosophical question. What's the point of living? And the answer in the end is all of the enjoyable experiences that you can have in life that are an end in themselves. I don't know what else you would answer to that.
Why doesn't that satisfy some people?
Often religion. There has to be some other reason, some other outside external justification that can back up or legitimate life. In other words, they don't fully grasp that life is an end in itself. My life is an end in itself. The enjoyment of my own life, the joy that I experience, the pleasure, and I don't mean just like getting drunk or something. I mean, I take pleasure to have the whole wide range of enjoyment. Anything that falls under actual enjoyment, joy, like the time you spend with Frankie. It's fun. You come home and he's like, you're home, and he's like jumping up and down. It's like anything that's, or you're really proud of a movie that you did, or an episode like that was really, I was on fire there, that went really well, and it's like you just really feel the enjoyment of your own efficaciousness in your field, and it's like all of these kinds of things, that this is what makes life worth living. And if those were absent, it wouldn't be worth living, and you couldn't give an answer to the question. And so the kind of pleasure broadly understood where it includes things like experience of happiness, joy, pleasure, all of those kinds of things. This is the meaning of life. It's what makes life worth living. And so yes, throw out hedonism as an ethical like standard for sure, but embrace pleasure and embrace short range pleasures. Embrace pleasure is an end in itself, but just don't embrace pleasures that sabotage your other goals. So you have to integrate your goals. You have to integrate your pleasures. You have to integrate your various pursuits so that you're not accidentally sabotaging some of your other things that are more important to you. So you have to bring a kind of, just so you have to bring a kind of harmony between your reason and your emotions. You have to bring a harmony between the short range and the long range. Between long range expectations, where the pleasure and the enjoyment takes a while sometimes, and the now. But I don't like the advice to live in the moment, where that means, in effect, don't worry about the long range. The long range is damn important. But don't forget the moment, because you'll only ever experience the moment. You don't experience the future now, and you don't experience the past now. You experience the present. And so it's just, if you ignore the now, every now, you've ignored your life. Yeah, but you have to integrate the now with the future, you know.
I mean, it's such a beautiful concept to me. Did you ever read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle? Because I feel like those types of guys try to reduce us to a perceptual level of consciousness, and they try to say that's what's going to make you happy. Acting teachers do the same thing. They try to get you to not to disconnect your head, to just live at a perceptual level, and that is sort of the key to everything. What a terrible piece of advice that lots of people seem to take as sort of the other side of the
But the
taskmaster.
long range is the conceptual. So when you're thinking about the long range, you're thinking about cause and effect. You're thinking about cause and effect over time, in effect. And you have to project outward, away from not just the immediate moment, not to ignore the immediate moment, but to integrate the now with the future, or what you plan out, or what you're thinking about the future. But you know, one of the reasons people tell you not to do that is that's a source of anxiety. You know, if I'm thinking about, oh, what will happen if I go on the date and then she doesn't like me, and that's going to be, I don't know, it's kind of awkward, and like you're just projecting out to the future. But if you're just in the moment and you ignore the future, but you're ignoring causality, and you're ignoring the kind of integrations that you could easily make, the kind of knowledge that it's easy to face, or like easily readable. You could call it up in a kind of easy way. It sounds more like it shut down the conceptual level. Yeah, it's terrible advice. Now, well, put it this way. In most cases, that's terrible advice. It could have some therapeutic function if somebody who's like paralyzed with anxiety and you're just trying to get them to a little happy space, so to speak, where they're not constantly obsessing about all the things that are giving them, and they just need a little temporary peace. You like some kind of like meditation or somewhere you just sort of in the now, you're not thinking about the future, you're not planning out anything, you're not worrying about what could happen in the future, or you're not beating yourself up about the past, and you just, there could have a therapeutic effect for that, but it's not a way of living. You couldn't function in life if that was your way of living, but it's not about functioning. It's about getting to a place where you're not feeling all sorts of negative emotions.
That's
so
important.
Like, it might have some kind of therapeutic effect, but you can't live your life like that.
I mean, that's an important distinction to make, because I remember when you were talking about Stoicism and you started writing articles on Stoicism. I was at OAC, and I remember reading the Stoics and thinking, well, this is sort of an interesting emotional triage. Like if you're in really deep emotional straits, in some respects, some of these ideas can help you out of a terrible emotional fix, but it's no way to live. Just like living in the moment is concentrating on what's in front of you right now can keep you from obsessing on something that doesn't exist in the future and developing anxiety. You still, as a human being, have to live for those values in the future. You can't live just entirely in the
And you
moment
want
now,
to.
like What's that?
And you want to achieve those goals.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, if
you
you have
want to.
no goals, but I'll get a jug of milk or I'll lie down on the couch or get up, it's like you have a meaningless life. So a lot of it, it's about a lot of meaning in life is about pursuing long range goals, pursuing and maintaining that kind of perspective over time. So you need that perspective. But again, like you said, is long range goals also, I mean, there's a motivational issue, like keeping the value of it, of the goal, the end, sort of real to you in the process of pursuing it, and not treating it as a duty. Thou shalt go to jiu-jitsu. It's more like, no, I want to be healthier, I want to be stronger, I want to be whatever. I don't go to jiu-jitsu, I know you do, but uh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think of it as thou shalt go to jujitsu, but it does feel sort of like a church in many ways, and it is the one of the times where you get to experience being completely in the now, and it being a very liberating time. You're solving immediate problems that are coming to you, and it completely consumes your mind and body. And for that hour and a half, it's actually a great release.
What's
I've
therapeutic
found.
in that regard too? I think psychologically, it's like also, you go to the gym or something, and when you're pushing up 200 pounds, you're not thinking about, the job interview 2 weeks from now or whatever it is. It's sort of, you're just in the moment. Um, and part of it, yeah, and there are all sorts of ways in which you can treat yourself when things are difficult. I always bring music that I like to listen to when I go to the gym. It's just simple, like obvious sort of things. I try to. Here's something I think people should do, and I think maybe they don't do enough. Partly because it's all considered as my long range plans. I think people. This is just me. This is not objectivism per se, but I think it's consistent with it. But it's just. I think one should try to build in pleasure and enjoyable experiences into one's daily living. Not, it's a nice to have maybe at the end of the week if I get an hour or something, but to find ways to integrate it into your living. So here's again a simple example of something just I noticed myself. Um, it's your anniversary and you buy some flowers for your wife and you put it on the dining room table or something. And then you notice it's kind of nice to have flowers around. Why do I do this like once a year? Like flowers are beautiful. Maybe every Friday before the weekend starts or something, go pick it up at the grocery store. I mean, it's not expensive. Grab some flowers and put them on the table. And then you find it, I always have flowers on the table. I have flowers in my house all the time. I come in, I can smell them a little bit. It's an aspect of beauty that I've added into my life. It's a daily sort of pleasure to see them there, and I change them out sometimes. And it was sort of like, what have I been doing? Like, why haven't I not been doing this? Well, I read it was some book on wine or something, and I don't know much about wine, but and the guy says, why do people only drink champagne like on New Year's or something? It's just wine. They just use a different method of making it, so it has some bubbles or whatever. But it's not like, oh, it's the sacred thing that you can only do on one time of the year. It's like, that's nuts. I mean, like champagne is wonderful. You have champagne. It's like you can have it on Friday. I don't know. But it's
Just don't do
in
it
the
like
morning before work. No, okay. But
just,
it's
just don't do it
yeah,
like
it's
Larry Hagman did. Larry Hagman would have 5 bottles of champagne a day. So
really. Was
yeah,
he the
that
guy on Dallas?
yes, he was the guy on Dallas and I Dream of Jeannie, and he had a liver transplant, and I think still went back to the multiple bottles of champagne a
Yeah.
day.
So that's not what I'm advocating, but finding ways in which you can just integrate enjoyment, pleasure into one's life on a regular basis, not as a treat, but as something important to one's daily life. And your form may vary and what brings you joy or something. And sometimes, like listening to music. So I have a Bluetooth speaker, and so I'm always listening to music. Or if I'm working, I got headphones. I'm always listening. I can't function without music. But sometimes it's a different kind of, and that's a way of bringing a kind of enjoyable experience throughout my day as I'm working. Um, but sometimes it's nice I mean, we don't really have records anymore, but sometimes it's nice to just put on a CD or a music deliberately, not just turn on some channel, which just feeds you a bunch of whatever, but to quite deliberately pick out a record or a CD that you want to listen to. And you're doing nothing but listening to the music. You actually put it in lay down on the couch or, whatever it is, your favorite chair, and just you're there to listen to the music. It's as an end in itself. And it's not, I'll do this for a little bit and then I'll be okay to go back to my work. And it's like, no, it's okay to just have pleasure.
And
But again, like,
might
yeah.
I say that it doesn't have to be Rachmaninoff because you're an objectivist. It could be
Well, let's get to
Metallica
that.
too. Yeah,
Let's get to that.
let's talk about that. Where you can enjoy more than Vermeer. Vermeer's a great painter, but you could also enjoy other painters. You can enjoy Monet, even though as an impressionist, the objectivist view of art may not necessarily consider it as say valid or as value clarifying, let's say, as other art. You can still enjoy Monet, even though it's not in canon, so to speak. But talk about that a little bit, because there are
Sure.
people who feel
So
guilty that they listen to heavy metal or something.
yeah, and we should get rid of that, all of that as well. So, one of the things, another sort of pitfall is to confuse Rand's preferences. And I don't mean preference like it's some subjective notion or something, but it's just sort of like what Rand likes in art, what Rand likes in music, with what you should like as an objectivist. The older I get and the more experience with objectivism, the more crazy it sounds that people do this. And yet I think I did it when I was 19. I think partly it's just like the heroes in her novels. You want to emulate them. You want to be like them. But it doesn't mean having orange hair like Howard Rourke in The Fountainhead. It doesn't mean being an architect. It means facing life the way he faces life, living by the principles he lives by. And that's the abstraction that you're supposed to draw from the character, not you're supposed to be thin and have orange hair and be an architect and, be a bit aloof as a person. Like, I'm not aloof as a person. I remember, this is embarrassing to say this, but I did it. I know. I tried to sort of be a bit more like Howard Rourke is in the story, and he kind of doesn't notice people, And I tried to live like that. It lasted about 2 days. Like, I couldn't do it. Like, I actually like people. I notice people. I interact with people. I'm kind of gregarious in my own sort of way. And I realized this is just not me. Like, and then you realize, no, this is how the character is drawn in a fictional story for certain kinds of reasons. But it's just like, it doesn't mean everybody has to be that. And then you read about Francisco d'Anconia. Like, he's a completely different personality.
Yeah.
He's a little bit more, I don't know, happy's not the word. He's just more on the face, sort of benevolent universe, he's just, it's just, he exudes the joy of living. Like all the time. And it's sort of like, that's a little more like me. Like, I'm not Francisco d'Anconia, but that it's a little bit more like me and how I feel about life and how I don't respond to things. And then you realize, you're taking it too concretely, what you're trying to emulate or live up to. And you can do this with Rand as well. You learn a lot from Ayn Rand. She's clearly brilliant. You're getting all of these insights and perspectives. You admire her enormously, let's say. And you start to think objectivism says I should like Rachmaninoff because she loves Rachmaninoff. In fact, she thinks that Rachmaninoff's one of the great romantic composers. And I think she's right about that. But it's just, and she didn't like Beethoven's music. Like, I love Beethoven. And she says she recognized he's a great composer for sure. Like, I mean, obviously, but it's just not the music that she wanted to go to when she goes to music. She just felt it was a little too, you could put it malevolent universe, but it's too, battling fate. It's too much about the music. It's the struggle. It's the struggle against a negative. And a lot of that comes out in his music. And just like, I don't like that in terms of music. Now, I don't think all of his music is like that. And I don't know how wide ranging her knowledge of these various composers was and what she listened to, but, and painting, her views about painting. It's like, I think, so the first step I think one should do is try to figure out a couple different things. One, what does objectivism have to say about art and how to think about art as a phenomenon, and how to think about different schools of art? That's one kind of question. But don't think of, so when you think about art, I think a person's reaction to art, and by art, I mean, I don't mean just painting, right? It's art, painting, it's like painting, sculpture, music, theater, like movies. I mean, it's your response to art is highly personal. It's very, very personal. It runs deep if your response is deep. And don't think of yourself as what should I like. Just abandon that whole perspective. There's no what should I like. It's what do I like. That's how to like think about your response to art. Don't be censorious. The first thing is, what do I respond to, and why do I think I respond to it in the way that I do? So I hate like heavy metal stuff. I have objectivist friends that, oh my God, they're totally into it. And they just love it. And they, no, 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 you haven't listened to the right thing. Here, you got to listen to this band. I can't stand it. And it's
Really?
like, yeah. And
You
does
haven't
that,
found
what
one.
depends what,
Not one band yet?
and what
Okay.
depends what you mean heavy metal. I think, but all of the stuff that's like, that's always like, that's all it is. I can't stand it. Like,
Right.
I find it like intolerable, and it's completely, my whole soul says no in every respect to it. And I don't mean like I wouldn't put Metallica in that same category.
Led Zeppelin?
But
Led Zeppelin?
oh no, Led Zeppelin's cool.
Okay.
No, I don't put that. It depends what you mean heavy metal. I guess it depends what. I mean, there's heavy metal, speed metal, death metal. I can't keep track of
Death
all this
metal,
stuff.
I can't do the death metal stuff.
Oh, so I don't even, maybe my categories here are not being, I'm not communicating right because the categories I don't really have a clear sense of. But there's some kind of that, so I just can't stand it. I can't stand country music, like country Western music. Does that mean that's my aesthetic evaluation of it? No. If somebody asks you, what's your, like looking at this as music, what's your evaluation of it? And you might say, okay, well, they typically have, the lyrics have some sort of a story. There's a kind of a melody, and you can talk about, okay, it's relatively simple, you know, in not a derogatory way, but it's like you could analyze it as music and talk about it, like, but what my own like visceral sort of response to it is, I can't stand it. And but if I ask myself, why is that? The answer isn't objectivism says I shouldn't like it. The answer is not, I have some aesthetic theory that tells me that it fails to meet criteria A, B, C. None of it's like that. It's, I grew up in a small town, and it was everywhere. It's at the gas stations. It's coming out of the cars. It's in the bathrooms. It's in the mall. It's in the school. And it all seemed to integrate with a kind of small town mentality that I couldn't connect with, that I rejected, that I didn't like, I frankly had contempt for. And it was like, daddy worked for the Rubbermaid plant, granddaddy worked for the Rubbermaid plant, so that's what I'm going to do. They never leave the town, family after family, generation after generation, they stay in town. I'm like, there's a whole world out there, was my attitude as a kid. Like, my dad would come home from a business trip and we'd go pick him up at the airport, and you'd see these guys in like turbans and in business suits and briefcases. They're going places, and there's this whole world out there of people in like purpose. They're dressed nicely. They look successful. And it was like, how can you, this town is not the universe.
Yeah.
It's not my universe, this town. And that's how that music is integrated with that now for me. It's like, this music is not my universe. If I pictured myself living in the world where there's a tear in my beer and the best thing is Saturday night with my pickup, that's not my universe. I don't want to live in that world. That's not how I think about my values. It's just antithetical to everything I want in life. I'm not cut out for that world. Or that world's not cut out for me. One or the other way. I don't know how you think about it. But it's just, so that's one of a few aesthetic responses. I know its roots. And I know why I respond so strongly to it. It's metaphysical. Like, this is not my universe. This whole constellation of values and perspective, and it just, my whole soul says, no, life is not like that. That's not the essence of life. That's not what's important.
Do you evaluate?
And not to like dump on anybody who likes country music. That's not the issue. You could have a very different response to it and very different reasons. Yeah.
But do you evaluate art, every art that sort of comes into your world, that deeply? So if you like or dislike something, do you try to get to the root of why you like or dislike something every time?
I try, and for the same reasons I do it with wine. So again, I'm no wine expert, but it's just sort of like partly it's you learn how to find what exactly your attachment is to it, what it is that you like about it, and it helps you find new things that are like it. So if I start to realize, well, um, I like wine that's, well balanced, tends to lean dry. I like some fruit, but not ripe fruit. And you kind of get a sense of like what it is you like. You can order a little more easily, and you know how to pursue your values. And you know what it is that you like about things. I think it's important. When it comes to art, like why do you have this response to this type of music or this type of painting or whatever? Um, it tells you something about yourself. And it tells you often about something that's really kind of deeply held values that are not often sort of brought to mind or center stage in your kind of explicit thinking. But it's not easy to find the roots of this. So sometimes, like there's some kind of music I like, and I might say, well, why is it that I respond so positively to this? Why do I want to listen to this all the time? Well, what does it do for me? And I think I can get a handle on some of it, and sometimes I don't know. Like it's sometimes these things I just respond to it, and it's not fully clear, but I think it's worth doing the introspecting. And Ayn Rand has this a couple of articles on this issue in her book, The Romantic Manifesto. One's called, um, I guess the major one is called Art and Sense of Life, where she talks about the kind of psychological roots um, that underlie a person's response to art. And she thinks it has to do with some very early value judgments. When you're thinking about yourself in the world, what's possible to you, what's important in life. Is it excitement? Is it calm? Is it like what is important in life? And often artworks will resonate or bring out, they'll tap into is the word I'm looking for, some of those kind of things. And which is often why you respond in a deep way to things, and it's often hard to understand. It's often hard to pinpoint like what it is about this. So there's an element of it of a psychological cause, not yet, not yeah, not in a negative sense, but just like it's an early kind of formed value judgments about things. But I mean, that's a complex concept, and it's the kind of thing that you'd have to think about that. You can, oh, this is a sense of life, and let's start using that term, and you have to think about what she means by that, and whether what she's saying there whether you can connect with that introspectively. And I certainly can, and the country music is my best example for that, because I feel like I really know the roots of it, like as far down as I can go with it, and other things it's not that clear to me.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So
But don't confuse her likes with what you're supposed to like. That we're getting back to that issue is just think about what do you respond to, and can you figure out why? What is your value connection to this kind of thing? There's no, thou shalt like anything. Like I love Rachmaninoff's music, so it's like and I don't have to worry about that connection. But
But do you like
yeah, and
do you like Van Halen?
um
And do you like let's say Van Hagar when they had Sammy Hagar on, they did a song called The Best
Van
of
Hagar, I've never heard of that.
yeah,
So I know Sammy Hagar and I
they
know
did
Van
they
Halen.
did a song called The Best of Both Worlds. I want you to listen to that song. Tell me if you hate it, but the lyrics I love the lyrics because it's about exactly what we're talking about. And
You
it's
know
got
Van Hagar?
No, it's Van Halen, but people would call it Van
Okay.
Hagar. So it's Van Halen when they had Sammy Hagar singing for them. Best of Both Worlds. One of my favorite songs. Whenever I want to tune up and get jazzed, I listen to that song and listen to the words because it's all about living, powerful living. You got Van Halen
Okay.
shredding on the guitar.
Yeah.
It's powerful. It's giving me chills. You may hate it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I love it.
No, 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 no. I don't think anything Van Halen does would be something I hate. I remember like Jump, right?
Yeah.
That's a great song.
Yeah, jump.
It's not the kind of thing where I'm going to go buy the album and then listen to it around, but it's like when it comes on, yeah, that's cool. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, oh good. So
I mean, me for the most part, I listen to classical and jazz, for the most part. But yeah, no, but I like Led Zeppelin. I like Pink Floyd a lot.
yeah.
Well, certain aspects of Pink Floyd that I like.
Yeah, the
Some of it's
world's
like really
misinterpret
gloomy and
stuff.
depressing, and other things I really like. Like, yeah. Anyway, we start talking about music.
Do you you should get the album Westlake by Bob Florence. Do you like big band jazz at all?
Um, it's not my top, but then I don't listen to it a lot. But Westlake,
Bob Florence was a genius. I saw him live at a jazz club called Carmelo's, which is no
uh-huh.
longer in Van Nuys, but this is in the late 70s. He was brilliant, and there's a song called "Soaring." I don't remember if it's on the Westlake or if it's on an actual album called "Soaring," but you should listen to "Soaring." It is a fantastic, fantastic tune.
Okay, I just wrote it down. That's cool.
Frankie
If anybody,
Cap and the Juggernaut. I mean, some of those. I used to go. My mom dated a guy who was a jazz musician, so I would go to jazz clubs,
oh
and
man, I wish I want to do that.
I'd listen to.
I like the notion of going to a jazz club. It just seems so cool.
Oh, it's great.
Uh,
And I listened to Louis Bellson, one of the greatest drummers of all time. I went to see his band live when I was a kid.
yeah.
And Jeff Goldblum plays jazz, so I would go
All
watch
right.
him band. Yeah.
One of the interesting things I found when I came to Southern California is I discovered Latin jazz.
Oh,
I like Latin jazz, and it's like before I thought I knew what Latin jazz was, but I guess I didn't until I came out to Southern California, and now they play it on the radio all the time, and I enjoy a lot of it. But,
I didn't even know there was a categorization called Latin jazz, so I'm gonna have to check that out. But if you hear soaring, I don't know. I think it's gonna do
okay.
something. I think best of
Yeah, and
both.
maybe not, but that's an interesting thing too, is when this is another thing about art. Oh, you got to hear this, you got to see this, or whatever it is, and it's like often when objectivists say you've got to see this movie, I know I'm going to hate it.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what's behind that or what's going on. It's not a rejection of some kind of conformity, like you're supposed to like it, and then I'm like, I'm bristling as my individualist or whatever. There's none of that. It's just sort of like I find that if people think that this is a kind of it represents the values that objectivism respects or promotes or whatever, and they think it's embodied in a movie, I usually don't like the movie, and I don't like its treatment of those values. But anyway, that's an aside. But the
Is it
main
because
thing
the
is
movie's didactic? Is that usually it's a sort of didactic, which is preachy for anybody
I
out
find
there?
them, well, it depends. It could be all sorts of different things. Sometimes I just think this is just not a good movie, number one. Sometimes it's kind of a little too feel good and simplistic for me. Um,
Can you give me an example, like something recent that I might
now
that
I'm
I
going to
might go to?
piss everybody off. And it has to do with painting as well. Like, there's no such thing as objectivist art, for one thing. There's no such thing. And Ayn Rand says there's no such thing as objectivist art. If you want to put one thing in that possible category, it would be my novels. And I don't like kind of artwork that it takes the concretes that Ayn Rand idolizes in her novels and just simply carries them over into other works, and it just seems too derivative, and I'd rather look at Salvador Dali's painting of a piece of bread on the corner of a table. Like, it's just more interesting. But yeah, so it's okay. This could also be me too, not me qua objectivist philosopher, but just me as an individual. Because sometimes people say, "Oh, you got to hear this piece of music." Oh, and like you tell me, soaring. I listen to, oh, it doesn't do anything for me. But maybe not. But it's just music is highly personal in the reaction, and you can't be too put off. If you put something before someone and say, "You've got to see this painting. You're gonna love this. This means so much to me," and the other person's like, "Oh, that's kind of nice." Like, don't be
Wah,
too
wah,
put off
wah.
by that. Just because that's pretty. But don't be too put off by that, because just people's response is highly personal. Um,
Yeah.
Not necessarily subjective. It just means highly personal. And the things that resonate with them resonate or don't for certain kind of reasons, that you should expect that the things that mean the world to you in terms of painting may not mean much to somebody else, even somebody who you really like and respect and get along with and hang out with. It just doesn't, they don't respond to it in the same way. So don't censor yourself in terms of some notion of what you think objectivism thinks you should like. You just think, what do I like? Why do I think I like it? What am I responding to in it? That's the first step, at least. Yeah.
Aaron, I know we don't have much time because I've been keeping you for so long. You're very interesting to me, and but we have a couple hands raised, and I just want to
Oh
get
yeah,
to before we go.
Allie and Rose.
Allie, so why don't you you have a question, Allie? Why don't you come on and throw it at us?
I do, but as I was telling you yesterday, Mark, I have a hard time trying to figure out how to work this. So maybe you can help me out. So in objectivism, y'all were talking about emotions earlier. I was wondering if y'all could elaborate on a topic that wasn't really brought up, but I kind of want to talk about it because it does have to deal with reason and reality. I want to talk about like, Aaron, what is your view on toxic positivity and toxic negativity? Like what do objectivists fall in those categories? I know it's probably a universal thing, but I was wanting your thoughts on that.
I don't know what either of those are.
Oh,
What's toxic positivity, toxic negativity?
Toxic positivity is like when you deny like bad things are happening around you and the people are telling you to get over it and stuff like that. But you can also do it to yourself. And toxic negativity is a constant of putting yourself down all the time. And there's like no firm line. And when people like point it out to me or point it out to somebody, because we've all been guilty of it at some point, it becomes like the norm for some people. And I just wanted like what y'all's opinions are on it. I had a hard time trying to figure out how to work this, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't like the terms toxic positivity, there's something, it's too much, it smacks too much of a label where it obfuscates what the actual issue is. What the phenomenon you described as toxic positivity is an issue of evasion. It's deliberately focusing only on the positive while ignoring the existence or the reality of the negative. But you shouldn't be ignoring or denying the existence of anything that's real. So it's one thing to, and can often be healthy to, remind oneself that what's important in life, what makes life worth living, the things you need to focus on, most of all and primarily, is the good, is the positive. That's what makes life worth living, not spending your life focusing on the negative. But you can't ignore the negative, because often what you have to do is fix it. If it's in your own life, you have self-confidence issues or something like that. You can't act like, well, that doesn't exist because what, and just like as if you're just throwing your mind out of awareness of your own, problems or difficulties or challenges, weaknesses, whatever. You need to pay attention to those things. Just don't make them the essence of life. They're not. But you need to pay attention to them because often you need to deal with them. And when it comes to the negativity, this is a real problem. I mean, if what you're describing is you're constantly sort of downing on yourself, constantly putting yourself in a negative light, it's the sort of flip side of the other thing is that, I mean, is there nothing good about you or the person that having this issue? You'd have to dig into what the roots are of that for an individual. Like, why do I feel so negative about myself, for whoever has this kind of problem? Why am I so focused on my failings or my weaknesses or whatever it is? Am I really being objective? Like, have I actually done things with my life? Have I done things that are positive? Am I the kind of person who can do good things? Or is it just that some of these things that I'm focusing on have been particularly important to me of late or particularly painful of late, and I just focus too much on them?
And Aaron,
But I
can,
don't think life should be, you navigate between toxic positivity and toxic negativity and draw a middle line. I think both are often about evading something that's there or failing to give a real reality to all that's there, and you're not putting it into the right context. So it's not about drawing a kind of like a middle course or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And it sounds like, especially the toxic negativity, it sounds like a lot of that delving into the roots of it is a psychological issue that has to be dealt with probably in a good psychiatrist's office, or a cognitive behavioral therapist who can help you integrate. I think cognitive behavioral therapy is the way to go. That's my perspective. But some good cognitive behavioral therapist who can help you get to the root of it and help you get past it, because that should be the object of getting over both those kinds of evasions. Especially,
But simultaneously, the response isn't to tell yourself, "Oh, I'm good, I'm fixed, I don't have any problems," because then it's just more evasion, and then you never fix problems. Yeah, I don't know if
right.
that's helpful.
Did that help
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Alan?
It was. Yes, it
Thank
does.
you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Okay, Rose, go ahead.
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry guys, I was late because I was working, but I'm so glad that I to get the few moments, the last moments, and I was totally vibing when you guys were talking about music, because yeah, music is it's literally my life. So yeah. My question is not though about music. It's about what Rand said about photography. Mark knows that I'm a photographer. I've been working in the area since 2015, and I'm a freelance and I love what I do. But according to Rand words, she didn't consider photography as an art, and I completely disagree. She basically said that photography was just something technical. So obviously, I want to hear your Yao's perspective on that statement. And obviously, add in mind that, well, I don't agree, but I want to get your opinion first before I can, continue with my argument.
Yeah, I feel like I don't fully understand her perspective on that issue. If I had to give it my best shot, the way she describes artwork is that it's a selective recreation, and that what one is doing in a given medium is selectively recreating certain kinds of objects, certain kind of a scene, or whatever it is. It could be notes, right? Sounds, to project out something that the artist wants to project, something metaphysical, something about this is the world, such is life, such is man, like this is you in the world, in effect. And she thinks of photography, at least this is how I read it, as you're just capturing what's there. Now, if you talk to, it depends what kind of photography is going on. So if you're a Life magazine or a National Geographic photographer, and you go around taking pictures of, I don't know, elephants and lions and, whatever it is, right? The gorgeous pictures, by the way. We had a subscription to that, and I was like, these pictures are just amazing. I don't consider that art at all. But it's one thing to have an aesthetic eye to what captures something in terms of its symmetry or beauty, or the whole composition of it. Like, there's something aesthetic to composition for sure. I think I actually have a good eye for that. But anyway, and it's in all sorts of areas that have that element of something aesthetic, but not art. So, but it's not art, like design, like think of furniture. I'm very sensitive to basically anything aesthetic. The shape of a couch, like shoes, like anything that's aesthetic, I'm very sensitive to it, because there's something about its harmony, something about the color, something about the look, something about the way it fits in with other things. So there's the kind of photography where it's like you take a picture of some guy on the street, you take a picture of a lion. It's like this is not art. It's just a technical machine's reproduction of something out there in the world. Now, I think the borderline cases are things like where the photographer is very carefully setting up a kind of a scene where there is a kind of a recreation in effect being done. You take a like Man Ray or something, like you take some of these where it's almost like you're trying to set up like an art scene. Or if you're a cinematographer, you're trying to set up a kind of a scene and you've very carefully arranged it and for this to kind of capture something. I think that's borderline. I think that you'd have to ask more questions as to what would make that not art, or that could be a case where, okay, well, maybe there are some kinds of photography that could count as art. But if you're just talking about like, so as Mark was alluding, I take pictures of my food. Like on Instagram, it says I teach philosophy and take pictures of my food. And they're kind of, you could call them artistic in a way. I mean, I try to make them look nice and, you know, whatever. It's not art. Like I know I'm not an artist and I'm not doing art. I'm trying to capture something beautiful, but beautiful is not the same as art. I'm trying to capture something where the composition is really cool. And composition is an element in art, but I'm not doing art. Like I know it. Now I could, if I were a professional photographer, I could be doing something that I think more is more what I'm doing is I'm doing what some people do in painting, but I'm doing it with the manner in which I set up a scene and I'm going to take a picture and maybe you can make a case for that. And it's like, no, this is more like art than what she was thinking, but you'd have to, well, unfortunately you can't talk to her about this, but it would be like, well, what do you think about things like that? Would you put that in a separate category?
Yeah,
Well,
I can
not.
totally.
And I don't know what she would say.
I don't know if Mark wants to add something, or can I continue?
No, I mean, I sort of agree with Aaron. There's an eye for symmetry, there's an eye for composition, but you're just capturing what exists. But there is a line, which I do consider art, by the way, cinematography, I do consider an art because of the way they have to they have to determine every aspect of the scenario. They have to light it in such a way as to get, you know, exactly.
And I think so did Ayn Rand.
Yeah. Yeah, so that kind of photography where they're setting a stage, it's everything about it is deliberate, is I think is art for me.
Okay, well, I started to study art when I was 15 years old, and the way that I studied not just photography, but I studied cinema. I drawing classes and design and everything. And the way that people taught me to see art, obviously I had to study everything, like from the Greeks and the Romans and until now. And Mark is about to kill me now, but I really like the postmodernist movements, because the way that I started to do my authorial photography is creating a concept. So before I even started as a professional, my people said that my photography was kind of artsy, because when I, got my gear, okay, I studied my brain and I wondered, like, okay, there's this concept, these emotions that I really want for people when see my photos to, okay, I'm feeling this, so this concept that you are showing is this. And that's how I started. But now, yes, I basically almost don't consider it as art, because I'm doing my job as capture reality, like weddings, what's going on. And what I love and what I do is capture the emotions. I love the spontaneity of people. I don't really like to recreate and to fake moments. I like to really reproduce and capture with obviously my techniques and in my way, what's going on. But when I do my type of photo, meaning not for clients, because I'm a fashion photographer, and what I love about fashion in general is just, it's about breaking the rules. It's about creating a concept. You have a team and you work for a concept, whether it's for a magazine or for a catalog or just for you. Because sometimes I just talk to someone and I'm like, okay, I I'm really digging this aesthetic, this concept, this emotion. I want to work through it. So let's, hire a makeup artist, hairstylist, let's do it on outdoor studio, and we bring and we transform, and yeah, voila. I think what we do and what we're up to do, it's art, because at the end of the day, we are just creating something. So I think when people categorize
let me
something
just
as
pause
art,
you there for a second. Let me just pause you there for a second. So I'm not sure what to respond to in all of that, but I think that a lot of what the kind of issues you're talking about come down to is, what do you think art is? And not that we're opening that up, but there's a whole kind of abstract topic for an episode, but it's what do you, I mean, just for yourself, like, what do you think art is? I mean, forget Ayn Rand's definition for the moment. It's just like, what do you think art is? And you might just have very different conceptions of what you think art is, what its function is, what would say count as art versus something that doesn't say count as art. And also you brought up is, what is the artist trying to do? In your case, you talked about some of your methods for coming up with ideas and how you approach things in terms of thinking about an emotion you want to capture or whichever it is. And different artists have different artistic motivations and different approaches to how they want to do it. But in the end, it's like, art is a specific kind of, if art is to be anything, it's a specific phenomenon with an identity. Otherwise, nothing's art or anything's art. And then you don't really have a phenomenon there. If Mark's a man and a teacup and a unicorn at the same time, there is no such thing. I mean, you don't have a concept yet of man or of unicorn or teacup. So it's, if you're trying to isolate some phenomenon as distinct from other kinds of phenomenon or a closely related phenomenon, you have to give it an identity. And the question I think to ask, I mean, as an artist, it should concern you. You should be interested in it. How would I define art? And without making define sound like some kind of super technical like thing, but it just, what are the kinds of things I classify as art that would fall in that bucket, so to speak, or fall under that umbrella? And what are the kind of things that maybe some people think of as art, but I wouldn't call it art? Because some people say, well, if I make a cup and I call myself an artist and I call it art, it's art, and who's to say otherwise?
It's design. It's art.
Well, but it is design. But is everything that's a product of design, like deliberate design, where you're trying to make it look pretty or look beautiful or interesting or whatever, is that what makes something art, or is that an aspect of art that's being brought into a utilitarian product? So the purpose of this is to hold liquid and to have a little handle so I don't burn my hand in the cup or whatever. It's a utilitarian object, but you can bring artistic elements to the creation of it. And that's the same thing with couches and shoes and, all sorts of things. But one of the things Ayn Rand thinks, at least, that's a distinctive feature of art is that it's not a utilitarian product. It's meant for contemplation as an end in itself. And the purpose of artistic contemplation is a certain kind of experience that the contemplator, if you put it, the consumer of art has. And these are some of the things that she thinks is distinctive of art and of the phenomenon that brings that kind of experience. But again, that's a whole longer discussion. But I think if you think I would include these kinds of things in art, Rand doesn't, and I think of these things as art, but she doesn't, part of the inference is forget Rand for the moment. Just say, like, what do I think art is? If I had to define it, what would it be? What would its identity be? What would its characteristics be, such that I could say, yeah, that's art, that's not art, and then think about that. I think that's just what I would do, just as a thinking project. I think that would be cool, because then it's more getting the sense of what you think, and then thinking about why.
Yeah,
and then you can I think you can more readily then compare different kind of conceptions of what art is.
Very good, Rose. We have to go on to one last question.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Thank you so much. This is really a huge topic, but yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So we have one last question there, because we've gone way over for you, and I know your time is precious. This greetings. This question is for Aaron. I think we answered this question already earlier in the show, but they say the higher the climb, the further the fall. Where do you put people denying themselves pleasure and joy in life, or where do you think they are coming from regarding their philosophy of life? Is there one? Thanks. I think we answered that sort of earlier on.
But I'll say a word about it. So I really don't like the expression, the higher the climb, the farther the fall, often because of what's meant by it. It's don't climb high because you'll fall hard. Don't aspire to like lofty goals because you'll just like Icarus, get your wings burned or whatever and fall down. And I don't think that's the right approach to life. I'm not suggesting that's your view of the statement, but you put where do you put people who deny themselves pleasure and joy in life? I put them in a sad place. I mean, it's like I don't put them anywhere, but it's sort of like if you think about how do you classify them, how do you think about them? I think they're living a life. Well, they're not living life. If you're really denying yourself pleasure and enjoyment and joy, you're extracting you're denying yourself what makes life worth living. Now, where is it coming from regarding their philosophy of life? That could be any number of things. I mean, often there's an anti-pleasure element in religion that we're taught. And there's a kind of suspicion of pleasure. It could be an issue too is, well, there's a lot of psychological roots. If it brings me joy, there's something wrong with it. Because there's something wrong with self-interest. There's something wrong with me focusing on my personal joy, my personal happiness, my taking that seriously. There's something selfish about it. There's something not right about it. If it's moral, it should just be hard, rigorous, demanding of my sacrifice, not that was awesome. like if you like that was great, that felt good, that was enjoyable, that brought me joy and happiness, that there's a certain suspicion of it because of the way you're taught to think about morality is all about self-sacrificial service and not about joy. And so you might have a suspicious attitude toward joy, and that could come from really anywhere. Not anywhere. I think it comes from a very specific place. And it's a kind of an anti-self, anti-material world, anti-pleasure, anti-body philosophy that goes back to Plato. And it's absorbed in Christianity. The good is the soul, the spiritual, the non-material, the non-bodily. And what's the source of evil? It's your body. It's your bodily desires, sex, the attitude to sex, the attitude to pleasure. These are dirty, right? These are the kind of things that you need to suppress. There's the long-standing issue of it's the anti-material world, anti-body, anti-physical, anti-pleasure, anti-sex. So the whole wing of that sort of approach to the world. Ayn Rand calls this the mind-body dichotomy. It's like this idea that there's the mind and the non-material and the spiritual and the soul, and that's on the side of the good. And then there's the body and the material and the physical and pleasure and sex and food, money, and drink, whatever. And all of that's on the side of the evil and the bad. And man is a combination of the two, of the good and the evil, of the spiritual and the godlike, in effect, and the dirty and the low and the matter and the mud. And we have to fight against the matter, beat it down, in effect, and keep it pure. And there's that whole mentality that comes out of a worldview like religion and like Plato that draws a strict divide and doesn't fully understand that man is a living organism. He's not a combination of meat and spirit. He's a living organism. He's alive. He's a bodily animal that is consciously aware of his actions and able to direct and control his values and choose his values and stuff. And he's not a soul in a corpse. So what's the relationship between the two? And well, one's good and the one's bad. You're one unified living organism. You're not a ghost. You have physical needs. You're not a slab of meat. You have psychological needs. But you have to attend to both and realize that there's both one integrated harmony.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end it, because I think that is so true. And I wish more people embraced this philosophy, because I think it's the key to happiness, and the world would be a much better place if it was an objectivist world. Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time.
My
You've
pleasure.
clarified tons of things for me. I hope people out there who are just coming in touch with objectivism, I think he's clarified I hope he's clarified some things for you. And I want to have these discussions more frequently, and open them up to the world more, because this philosophy has to be, it can't be on the outside anymore. I think it needs to be the main philosophy of life for the world, to keep us on track.
Me too.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron, for joining me here, and I wish you the best premises, and I'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thanks, Mark. You too. And thanks for the questions, you guys.
Thanks, guys.